So I'm going to bring on our next guest, who is a student, I believe, here in London. Tom, sure? Tom, you ready? Everyone give him a clap. Good luck, mate.
I've probably rewritten about half my speech on the train journey on the way down, but we'll see how we go. So, we're all here today because of the disregard and mistreatment of students in recent times, and indeed because of how they're still being treated in some cases. Being a dental student, I've experienced firsthand the kinds of disruption that policies have had and continue to have on learning. Online lectures, not being able to see patients as they fail screening systems, mass requirements throughout campus are to name but a few. There are still many of these things in place in universities across the country that should continue to be challenged. But I want to use my time today with you to try and think about the direction that we as individuals and as a society might want to take going forward. I'm sure many of us here will have experienced that feeling of isolation, when you think you are the only one who sees something deeply wrong with what has happened over the past 2 years. Well, it's so grateful to see all of you here today, and for anyone listening online as well. Great to know that you're there. But we must acknowledge that there are still significant swathes of the population who either actively attack those who dissent, or who simply do not realise that dissent is an option. Professor Matthias Detzman's work on mass formation psychosis, which has gained popularity in recent months, might provide a plausible explanation for the predicament that we find ourselves in. And I would encourage anyone who's not familiar with his work to go and study that. However, there are clear examples of mass psychosis that far predate the debacle. Today marks the 77th anniversary of the hanging of Dietrich Bonhoeffer by the Nazi regime. Bonhoeffer was a German pastor and theologian with widely respected books examining the role of Christianity in an increasingly secular world. He was also a vehement critic of Nazi ideology at a time when large portions of the German populace were supportive of Hitler's policies. I'd like to read you some extracts from a letter he wrote to his peers while conspiring against Hitler, in which he describes the idea of stupidity not as an insult against someone's intellect, but rather as a dangerous sociological problem. He writes, "Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. One may protest against evil, it can be exposed and, if needs be, prevented by the use of force. Evil always carries within itself the germ of its own subversion, in that it leaves behind in human beings at least a sense of unease. Against stupidity, we are defenceless. Neither protest nor the use of force accomplish anything here. Reasons fall on deaf ears. Facts that contradict one's prejudgment simply need not be believed. In such moments, the stupid person even becomes critical. And when facts are irrefutable, they are just pushed aside as inconsequential, as incidental. In all this, the stupid person, in contrast to the malicious one, is utterly self-satisfied and, being easily irritated, becomes dangerous by going on the attack. Never again will we try to persuade the stupid person with reasons, for it is senseless and dangerous." Well, it might seem here that Bonhoeffer suggests our attempts at reasoning might be hopeless. He goes on to explain this phenomena further and how we might address it. He says, "If we want to know how to get the better of stupidity, we must seek to understand its nature. The impression one gains is that, under certain circumstances, people are made stupid, or that they allow this to happen to themselves. We note further that people who have isolated themselves from others or who live in solitude manifest this defect far less frequently than individuals or groups inclined or condemned to sociability. And so it would seem that stupidity is perhaps less a psychological than a sociological problem. It is a particular form of the impact of historical circumstances on human beings, a psychological concomitant of certain external conditions. Upon closer observation, it becomes apparent that every strong upsurge of power in the public sphere, be it of a political or religious nature, infects a large part of humankind with stupidity. The power of the one needs the stupidity of the other. The process at work here is not that particular human capacities, for instance, the intellect, suddenly atrophy or fail. Instead, it seems that under the overwhelming impact of rising power, humans are deprived of their inner independence and, more or less consciously, give up establishing an autonomous position towards the emerging circumstances. The fact that the stupid person is often stubborn must not blind us to the fact that he is not independent. In conversation with him, one virtually feels that one is not dealing at all with a person, but with slogans, catchwords, and the like that have taken possession of him. He is under a spell, blinded, misused and abused in his very being. Having thus become a mindless tool, the stupid person will also be capable of any evil, and at the same time incapable of seeing that it is evil. This is where the danger of diabolical misuse lurks, for it is this that can once and for all destroy human beings. Yet at this very point, it becomes quite clear that only an act of liberation, not instruction, can overcome stupidity. Here we must come to terms with the fact that in most cases, a genuine internal liberation becomes possible only when external liberation has preceded it. Until then, we must abandon all attempts to convince the stupid person. This state of affairs explains why in such circumstances our attempts to know what the people really think are in vain, and why, under these circumstances, this question is so irrelevant for the person who is thinking and acting responsibly. But these thoughts also offer consolation in that they utterly forbid us to consider the majority of people to be stupid in every circumstance. It really will depend on whether those in power expect more from people's stupidity than from their inner independence and wisdom. I don't think you need me to tell you how poignant his words are in our current climate. Without context, it would be easy to assume that such words were written today, as opposed to the 1940s. Regardless, we should be careful not to use Bonhoeffer's thoughts as a license to call people sheep or stupid. That kind of approach makes us no better than the very people and institutions who have dehumanized and continue to dehumanize us for our beliefs. In contrast, I think Bonhoeffer makes a compelling argument for the opposite, for the need to maintain our values and morals if we are to overcome the challenges we face. We disagree with what is happening, not simply because we wish to prove a point or to show ourselves as better than others. We disagree because of our love for living and living well, because of our compassion for humankind, because we desire for us all to be free. We fight for others where they cannot. In doing so, we strive for the truth to prevail, yes, but we also strive for the beautiful. Sadly, seeing the world's recent reactions to issues outside of I do fear the kind of stupidity that Bonhoeffer refers to, or the mass psychosis studied by Desmond, is not going anywhere anytime soon. If anything, these past 2 years have simply exposed a deeper crisis in critical thinking. The way in which we have allowed ourselves to have our human vulnerabilities exploited has certainly not gone unnoticed by those in powerful positions with their own agendas. Whether it be Ukraine-Russia, intersectionality, climate alarmism, threat of cyber attacks, there are attempts to obfuscate people's ability to decipher what is true as a means for carrying out whatever agenda those in power desire, which immediately negates any good intentions. But if Bonhoeffer is right in deducing that subservience to one narrative does not mean subservience to another, then there will be many more opportunities for us to combat new mass psychoses before they fully take hold. With all this in mind, it seems reasonable to ask, what should I do then? I wish I could give you an answer to that, and even if I could, who would a 21-year-old student be to be telling you what to do and how you should do it? But if we can figure out how we got to the situation we're in, then maybe that will give us a clue on where to go. If Bonhoeffer's words are anything to go by, then we have a duty to remain open-minded and to think critically and to liberate individuals from the sort of psychological tyranny that begets societal stupidity. Maybe in pursuing that duty, we will no longer fear that isolation. And if we no longer fear that isolation, well, maybe we can make our own history for others to be inspired by. Thank you.